Today I'd like to talk about UX careers, and I will do this in a way to give you a sense of the skill sets that you've already learned in CS 220 and the ones that you can continue learning and refining over the course of the rest of the semester and over the summer. If you are interested in applying for internships or jobs after graduation in the field of UX. And the way I'm going to do this is to give you a blueprint for a standard organizational structure in a tech company. Now, this structure pertains to a small tech company. I'll explain some of the differences with larger ones later. And I also just want to note that this company does not really exist, but this is based on some of the things that I've seen and also what I consider to be best practices in terms of how companies set themselves up for success as they think about these different organizational structures. So the way that I will go through this is first the high-level positions. In a standard tech company would be a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, and a CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. Now here we're dealing with a company that's developing a website or an app, but other websites that are developing other types of technologies could have other C-level executives. You could have a CISO, a Chief Security Officer. You might have a Chief Data Officer. You could have a Chief of Operations Officer. There are many other C-level titles, but for a standard sort of app or web-based tech company, let's focus on these two. The CEO would handle standard operations. So for example, who to hire through human resources. Legal and compliance through a group of law-trained lawyers. There could be a sales team to build partnerships, a marketing team to create ad campaigns, social media campaigns, and the marketing team might also care about user growth and retention. And there are many ways in which the UX disciplines would care about similar things to what marketing cares about, and I'll talk about that. Now, under the CTO, we will have our UX design group. We might also have a data science and typically for a tech company, an engineering team. The engineering team would most likely be the largest group, meaning the most people would be employed within the engineering team. Okay, so you can expect this general structure to be found in a pretty standard tech organization. Now, the group that CS 220 pertains the most to is our UX design group. And a role within UX design that I think many of you would be interested in is the UX design position. This role is very general, meaning that there are many different things that UX designers do in all different companies. It's also a position that has a number of different titles. You could be a product designer, a UI UX designer, an interaction designer, maybe sometimes even just simply a designer. And they all tend to refer to very similar job descriptions, meaning that it's not a very niche role. You might join a company having interviewed for a UX designer position and do things that were quite different than what you were expecting at the start of the interview. So we'll talk more about the interview and job application process on Thursday. But it's really a very broad type of role. The next ones I'll talk about are more specific, so you'll see the contrast. But UX designer is a great entry-level role. Because of this, you get to do many different things and see over time on which ones you would like to specialize. So many companies hire for college grad roles for UX designers. Now, more specifically, a design team would include people who have more expert level backgrounds. So a UX researcher is someone who is trained in research methods dealing with human subjects, typically someone who has a PhD and extensive experience conducting research. And this is research that is done at all of the different phases of the design process, but most typically at the start or at the end, depending on the needs of the team. And a UX researcher would often interact with marketing and also with data science, collecting all different ways of gathering data about users and deriving design insights from that data. Another role that is very specialized is visual designer. Often someone with an artistic background who would be hired in this role. A visual designer would create logos, icons, illustrations, often helping with marketing campaigns. And what we call a more pixel design focus than a UX designer who might be dealing with designs at a higher level, say wireframing and the overall flow of a system. As we've talked about in class, we might also have a information architect, someone who deals with the content content and navigational flow of the product. And we could also have a front-end engineer. So someone who is much more experienced with the technical prototyping and who could quickly create high-fidelity prototypes. The front-end engineer could sit in the UX design team, and there are many benefits to doing that because they would be directly involved in the design meetings and design critiques, so they can give their engineering expertise to those conversations, but could also sit in the engineering team. And in fact, there is a lot of collaboration across those groups. To organize all of the collaboration that happens across all of these different teams, we would also typically see a product manager who would handle timelines, requirements, documentation, and mostly be spending their time collaborating and giving information amongst all these different groups. So working with engineering, data scientists, the UX design team, marketing team, And in a small organization would be someone who deals with the CTO and can also discuss issues with the CEO. So it's really someone who's navigating across all of these different groups. Based on what we've been doing in CS 220, you've seen what we did with contextual inquiry, and we'll be talking more about usability testing, which is the tasks of a UX researcher. We've talked about color theory, about design best practices, and we've also talked about some design tools, which would be under the umbrella of the visual designer. Most of these concepts are also highly relevant to a UX designer, and almost everything that we do in CS 220 would really fall under this position. We've talked and you've done activities on information architecture, and so this would be someone who really cares about taxonomies, how people develop mental models for systems, and how they navigate content structures. In this class, you're also doing a lot of front-end engineering and developing your prototypes. You've also had a number of assignments dealing with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if that was what you were spending most of your time doing, you might be a front-end engineer. And secondarily to structuring your teams, collaborating, submitting assignments, writing documentation for the assignments I've been asking you, a lot of that could fall under the umbrella of a product manager. So you can see how the class really fits into these different positions here. What I'm asking you to do this week is to create a template for your personal portfolio. Your UX portfolio could be really targeted for any one of these positions. The ones that I will be showing could be for a general UX designer. For myself, might be a little bit more focused on UX research because that's the experience that I've had. But you can really take this and make it focused on what suits you the best within any of these positions that you might be targeting. I also highly recommend thinking about the structure that I have here. And if you have any interviews with a tech company, thinking about how their structure might be similar or different to this one, and using this as a starting point to ask them questions about their structure. People love to talk about how their teams are organized, who is on their team, how they collaborate with others. So definitely use those as questions to have a long and in-depth conversation with any company that you might be considering to go work for. This will give you a great insight about whether that's a place that you can see yourself fitting in well, and whether they really have an idea of why they're hiring you for this position. So next, we will jump in to discuss the UX portfolio templates.